tere kõigile! Ma nüüd vahetan ennast inglise keelt kõnelevaks inimeseks, sest avasessioon on meil inglise keeles. Welcome to the opening session, debate, discussion, envisioning post-growth societies. I am Mairi and I will be the moderator of this discussion. In degrowth, contrary to what is thought or said, we do not focus on that something is going to be taken away from us, but we're looking more like alternative or different abundances. And for that, we have invited here Dr. Georgos Kallis, who will do us a keynote speech virtually. Georgos, are you here with us? Yes. Hi, so he's seeing us and we are seeing him. But Georgos, I will tell you, we have more than 100 people in this audience in front of me. Dr. Kallis is a researcher, political ecologist, and also ecological ecologist. And he is working or living in Barcelona, working in ICTA, and which is part of Autonomous University of Barcelona. And I am very delighted to actually introduce him because 1 year ago, I started my master's degree in degrowth in the same university, and Georgos was my first professor who was giving us introduction to degrowth. So I feel like it's been like an eventful year from being a student to now being here and being able to introduce him to all of you. So very excited about that. And what is maybe important to mention that we all have our different journeys and dates or years when we have reached the understanding that we need something different. So Georgos has it for decades already and has written 2 books, The Case for Degrowth and also Limits, Why Malthus Was Wrong and Why Environmentalists Should Care. Do recommend those books for you to read if you have ability to access them. And in his recent research, he's exploring the political conditions under which radical socio-ecological transformations can be achieved. And we have invited him here, and we're going to give him a word in a minute, to give us an introduction of what is degrowth, how it could be implemented, the why we already understand commonly in this room, but how and what we would love to hear. And also, before, I will say hi also to everybody who's watching us online. Welcome to the conference and welcome to the opening session. But Georgos, are you with us?
Yes.
Awesome. The floor is yours. Please continue and let us know, tell us what you want to tell us.
I'm gonna tell you what you want me to tell you. Thank you very much, Maggie. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really honored to be virtually with you. But I really congratulate you on the initiative and on expanding this series of events that started in the European Parliament 2 years ago, and now they're taking place in different countries, in different parliaments, in different contexts. Last week, I talked in the Congress, in the Parliament of Spain, in Madrid, where activists from Spain had organized an event. So it's very nice to see the debate around the growth moving to new places and coming to Estonia, where I have very dear friends and ex-students. And I'm very pleased to share what I know about with you. So the presentation is going to last, I think, around 22, 23 minutes, I hope. And as you asked me, I'm not going to focus so much on building the case for the growth, which is normally what we do for a lay audience, but I will focus a little bit on more on what would it mean to implement degrowth on a national level, to the extent that this is useful for you to think about ways that degrowth could be implementable and realizable in Estonia. And then I will also close by thinking a little bit about the politics, because it's one thing to say that this should be done, but the other is like how would be done in the current social, political, geopolitical context. Of course, everything I'm saying is tentative, and I hope we'll have the time to discuss these things more in depth with the panelists and with the audience after. Before doing that, of course, I will have to do a little bit of introduction on why degrowth, and just say that what is my starting point and what I assume is the premise here, or the third understanding. So the third understanding is that compound growth at, let's say, 3% per year, is something that is irrational. It is not rational to expect that this can keep happening indefinitely in the future. And it's a very strange expectation of our capitalist societies that they are built around this premise. So 3% per year might sound very little. I mean, if I told you that your salary would increase 3% every year, you would say, okay, that's okay, but it's not so much. But of course, whoever invests knows that the magic of compounding. So 3% per year, whatever the quantity is, doubles in 24 years. It's 4 times bigger in 48 years. Is 8 times bigger in 72 years. And before long, it has exploded to infinity. Now, imagine the current global economy, big as it is, to be 2 times bigger in 20 years, then 4 times bigger in 48 years, and then before the century, 1 century has passed, it's 10, 11 times bigger, the current economy. Obviously, there must be some limit to that. I know that we live in times where high growth is again on the agenda due to the artificial intelligence changes that are coming that might increase productivity, etc. But even if we assume that, technically speaking, economic growth can increase again 3 or 4% per year, we have to think of what limits it would meet. One obvious limit is the limits on the territory, on the land, on energy, but also, most importantly in our times, in terms also of carbon emissions and climate change. And I'm sure you are aware of the explosion in energy consumption that has been caused by AI. We hear that AI might solve climate change. For the time being, it just explodes carbon emissions. So the second premise that we all share is that so-called green growth, where the economy keeps growing to this crazy infinity, and somehow the impact on the environment goes down, is a fallacy. Empirically, it's been proven that it's very, very unlikely that it happens. And the final point, and then I will move to my main material, is that many of the crises we are currently experiencing, from the democratic crisis, the erosion of democracy, to geopolitical conflict, which is very much linked into a new race for resources and for control of territories, to the so-called care crisis, the fact that we have less and less time, we work more and more intensively, and we have less and less time to take care of ourselves and of our dependents. All these crises, and of course the ecological crisis that I just mentioned, and the social crisis of inequalities, is linked to the requirement of capitalist economies to grow at this crazy 3% per year. Because if you need to constantly make more and more money and invest more money, from somewhere you have to take that if you're on a finite planet. And you take it from where? You squeeze workers more, you try to get cheaper resources from other parts of the world, you try to cut on the welfare state, etc., etc. So all these problems are linked to growth. Finish here with making the case for degrowth, and let me move on explaining on what is degrowth and what would it look like in the context of a national economy. So you might be familiar with the donut economics framework, which I think as a visual, and I'm not using slides because I want you to use your imagination and be humans rather than me using the PowerPoint where it dictates what you are. But you know the donut economics. If you don't know it, it's a donut, as it sounds. And the basis of the donuts is the social foundations, you know. So the very first thing for donut economics, for the growth economics, for all of us being in this well-being economy field, is that the very basic part of our vision, but also of our goals, is that we should secure basic needs for everyone, a decent living for everyone in Estonia and for everyone in the world. This means that we should secure sufficient provisioning of things like healthy food, decent shelter with a good temperature, clean air that doesn't cause us cancer. I was just reading an article the other day about the increase in cancers globally, actually, in the developed, so-called developed world in ages after 40. So clean air, clean environment, free of microplastics, etc. Protection from disasters, which is increasingly becoming a problem due to climate breakdown. Protection from disaster, access to health and education, and of course, access to enjoyment, not only to basic goods, but also to the ability to enjoy nature, enjoy, here you have nice sea in Estonia, enjoy the sea without having to pay your a year's salary to access it. Access to enjoyment, to party, to being with your friends, to enjoying your life. These are the basics that should be secured for everyone. And the growth vision is that we are starting from this, from the foundation. This is the goal. Now, while doing that, we have to stay within so-called planetary boundaries. And one important boundary is climate change, because if the temperature, the global temperature keeps increasing the way it is increasing, none of these foundations would be achievable. They are already being eroded, and they will be more and more eroded in the future. So a second big part of degrowth, of the degrowth vision, is the necessity to phase out fossil fuels. Phase out, I repeat that, not develop renewable energies. It's like we were talking about phasing out ozone substances, uh, phasing out nuclear weapons that we unfortunately haven't done so much progress and we are back into that. But it's about phasing out. So the goal should be like using less and less fossil fuels one way or the other from now into the future. Now, to do these two things, both to change completely our energy system and phase out the main source of energy of the current system, which is fossil fuels, and at the same time secure and expand the provisioning that I talked about, we need to restructure economies. We need to restructure the economies. Restructure is an important word here. It means to take labor and resources from one part of the economy and place it on another. This means that we need to take resources and labor and time that we put into useless production. A lot of the stuff that they are produced in the current economies are useless in the context of supporting basic needs or phasing out fossil fuels. I'm thinking here for all the lollipops my my daughters who are 5 years old are eating, and I have to struggle, you know, to keep them. Not these lollipops, not but there is an abundance of useless and harmful stuff that they are pressed to us. Huge cars that they can kill children in the streets, or they can crush you to the floor if they hit you. Um, Jets for the very rich to fly around and have their fun within one day. All these things are useless if our goal is to secure a decent living for everyone and phase out fossil fuels. Redirect resources also from policing. Maybe in Estonia your policing is soft, but in other countries, including my country, Greece, or even Madrid, I was the other day, I was surprised by how much police and police cars are out looking at whatever you're doing and whether you're staying too long somewhere. Taking resources out of policing and war expenditure, which is the new fad starting in Russia and now responded by Europe and also always by the US, which is uh, spending incredible amounts of money into its war-making capacities, taking resources out of there, taking also resources from luxury consumption for the few, and putting it on redirecting these resources to the things we said that matter. Cleaning the air, securing the air in the cities, securing our infrastructures and our people from climate disasters, sufficient providing of health food, a house for everyone to put their head under. So this is the basic idea of the growth. Now, you might ask me, how do we do that? That sounds nice. Can we do it? This can we do it has two parts. The one part is whether we have ideas of how we would do it if we had the power to do it. And the second part is like, how do we get the power to do it? The two, those should not be mixed. We shouldn't be confused and say, because we don't have the power, we can't do it. Yes, but we know how we could do it if we had the power to do it. And we know because there is science behind it. I recently published a paper in the Lancet journal on post-growth literature. And we have a table there with a set of 10 policies that people have studied, they have modeled, and they say could bring us closer to what I just described. How exactly this will work and what policies would be suitable will differ from place to place. This is important to say. It would differ from Greece to Estonia, and it would differ from South Africa to Estonia. It would differ also from scale to scale. So we have policies that they are important to implement at the municipal scale. So policies that would be applicable to Tallinn and policies that would be applicable to a small town outside of Tallinn, and which would be very different from policies that would be applicable again to Buenos Aires. But we have a corpus, a core of what some of these policies could be in the context of a European country like Estonia. And we are studying these policies in our project called REAL, a post-growth deal. It's a research project, a quite big and generously funded by the EU project. Our website is easy to remember. It's realpostgrowth.eu. So in this project, what policies are we working with as our default proposal, or if you want, as our thought experiment? So the first policy we have, which is very important, is a job guarantee. So everyone who wants to have a job, the state, the public sector, can guarantee such a job at a decently paid salary. Now, this is not only, it might sound initially as a measure against unemployment, which is not, in the inflationary times that we live, is not particularly high. But it's not just about unemployment. It's first of all about raising the bar in the labor market higher. But more importantly, is about the public sector having enough people to do the tasks that need to be done, and where the importance of the presence of the public sector is essential, like the sufficient provisioning that we talked about, the access to public health, the transition of the energy system. Now, if the idea that I described is that we need to take people outside of the war machinery, production for luxury consumption, production of useless stuff, and bring it to the production of the basics, someone needs to orchestrate that. The market will not do that. There's no reason why the market has more profits to make in providing healthy food for everyone rather than producing chewing gums. It can be more profitable to produce sugary chewing gums than producing healthy organic food. So someone has to orchestrate that. And here the role of a job guarantee, the sector being able to pay for and redirect labor to what needs to be done, is essential. The second policy proposal we have is that of a universal care income. You might have heard of it as a universal basic income. We prefer to call it care income because our argument here is that everyone needs to have access to enough money to take care of themselves and take care of their dependents. This is a proposal that links to the feminist movement and 50 years old by now call to have wages for housework. So the idea here is indeed to have wages for care work that all of us, maybe those of you that you're now in your student years, maybe it's you're likely to not still be in the sandwich period, as we call it, where you have to take care of your children and of your parents. But everyone has to do it at some point, and everyone should have access to a basic salary to the extent that the things we depend on we have to pay for, to have access to a basic income to take care of themselves and others. The third part of the policy mixtures I'm talking about, so think of a triangle, job guarantee one corner, universal care income on the others. The third one is industrial policy to phase out fossil fuels. By industrial policy, I mean like governments did during COVID. They organized where they're going to buy the pharmaceuticals from. They paid for research on developing the vaccine. They paid for cheap production of masks. And very quickly, these things became available. That's industrial policy. But we need to do that not to fight COVID now, but to fight climate change and to phase out fossil fuels and develop, again, renewable energy at local scale, at sustainable scale, that the market is not willing to develop. The market is not investing enough on renewable energy, even though renewable energies we know now have very low cost and they are even cheaper than fossil fuels, but they are not more profitable. So still there is not investment going there. And of course, when the market invests in gigantic projects that they destroy landscapes, they uproot communities. They don't invest on projects that might have slower or lower returns, but that are maybe more sustainable. So job guarantee, universal income, industrial policy. And of course, the question is, you might be asking already yourself, is how do you pay for all that? And here, we might move from the less radical to the more radical ideas. The less radical is so-called credit guidance, that the governments can provide guidance on where credit should go. It shouldn't be just banks deciding to give credit where they normally give, which is just to buy houses or to put in the stock exchange market. So the government can direct credit. Or we can move to more radical proposals coming from modern monetary theory, and the theory of Mary Mellor, an ecological ecofeminist who has been writing for years about public money. So the ability of governments to understand that the money that is being produced and used by banks, it's actually produced by governments. And the governments, instead of circulating it to the economy via the banks, they could directly put this money on the restructuring of the economy that I just described. Now, all this sounds radical, but I would argue it's not much more radical than the transition you made in Estonia from a communist to a capitalist state. So maybe it's the time to make a transition from a capitalist to a post-growth state. And it's not more radical than what many capitalist economists too did in the post-war era, when they established the welfare states, they established public education, all the things we are still enjoying in Europe. And when they happened, they were also quite unthinkable. What do you need politically, though, for this unthinkable to become reality? For any big political change to take place, you need the base, you need a popular movement that supports this change. It's what you had in Estonia when you made the transition. You had a general feeling by the people that they wanted this transition. And you need to have what people are calling, social scientists are calling now, popular protagonism. You need a big part of the population that feels strongly about that and is willing to move in this direction. Now, you might tell me, and of course you would be right, that, I'm talking to people, the growth is not popular, or politicians, etc. I would challenge that, and I would be keen to discuss it more in our panel and in our discussion. But our studies and surveys that we are doing now, very scientific surveys with the London School of Economics and psychologists, a team of psychologists there, on what the beliefs and perceptions of people are, they are actually quite favorable towards the growth. The question is whether there are the political opportunities for this to be channeled into a winning political proposition. So you would be surprised to hear that the majority of the populations in the US and UK, of all places, that you wouldn't expect that, when given a vision similar to the one I just described to you and asked whether they approve of it or not, that around 60% said they approve it. When you tell them, do you approve degrowth or not, this falls to 20-30%, which is not low. Imagine you just say the word degrowth to someone and they say, yeah, I'm fine with it. And that's 20%. It's already quite high. But then when they're giving the full description that I just gave to you, it's 60% in favor. So that's quite impressive. The question is, how does this popular acceptability or desire of that first becomes a popular force, a social movement, and second, how the social movement becomes also a political movement? How does it get expressed into political parties that can claim state power in order to implement this agenda? This is the challenge. It's obviously a very formidable one, but I would argue it's not an impossible one. And it depends upon people like yourselves to build that momentum, that energy, and to bring that political change. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgos. I mean, I was sitting in lectures last year with him, so I was like now getting these memories, flashbacks from the lectures. Thank you for that. All right, there are chairs on this table for a reason. We have put together also an Estonian panel to now reflect, debate on the thoughts that came to our minds while listening. So I would love to invite here first Maia-Liisa Anton, who is a climate policy expert at the Estonian Fund for Nature and the coordinator of the Estonian Chamber of Environmental Associations. And in climate policy, she tries to expand the often very narrow carbon tunnel view to encompass all the limits of the planetary boundaries. Round of applause to Maia-Liisa. Then I would like to invite here Dr. Margit Keller, who is a social scientist who serves as a dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Tartu. In her research and teaching, she tackles social change at the level of both societal systems and individual habits. Welcome, Margit. And I would like to invite here Dr. Erki Karo, who is the director of the Ragnar Nurkse Department of Innovation and Governance of Tallinn University of Technology. His research focuses on the role of science, technology, and innovation in solving complex societal challenges, such as the Sustainable Development Goals and the green transition. And as we have here already literary talents here, so Erki also has written a book that has been chosen, well, co-authored by Rainer Kattel and Wolfgang Dreschler, that 2023 he won Academy of Management George R. Terry Award for Best Management Book. So congrats, Erki. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
All right. I have so many questions and so many thoughts. I hope you feel the same. I'm curious, what did you think of this thing, what Georgos said, that the transition we did from Soviet country to a capitalist country is none of the more difficult than making it now from capitalist to more growth to post-growth? What do you think? Do you see it as a easy thing, similar challenge? Margit?
Yeah, I remember one colleague of mine in a panel, in a similar sort of panel about 2 years ago. He was asked whether there was a debate, whether it's going to be an incremental evolutionary change or a revolutionary change. And one panelist X said, of course, we don't want a revolution. And then my good colleague said, oh yes, we didn't want the singing revolution. We wanted the singing evolution. And well, it's a nice metaphor, but At the beginning of my career as a sociologist, I studied consumerism, and which makes me a pessimist who calls herself a realist, I would say. And back in those days, late 80s, early 90s, when we re-established our democracy and independence, it was very tightly tied up with consumerism, and consumer liberties collided very strongly with sovereignty and civil liberties. And this merger of the free sovereign consumer equals free sovereign citizen, I think this is a very strong narrative in our minds, which makes it very difficult to engage with all this beautiful vision, which as a narrative, I agree, is absolutely beautiful. So.
Thank you, Margit.
Yeah, I can go always. I think to some extent, I think what George said, if you look at his list or a proposal of activities and when you start thinking about what it actually means, I think he's on the right track arguing that this is actually kind of a transformative thing we need. Because if you normally look at sort of degrowth discussions, it's talking about economy, and it's talking about the form of businesses we do, the form of industries we do and stuff like that. But now if you listen to George's discussion, he was talking mostly about policies, right? So he wasn't saying that in order to get to different type of an economy, we need to be different in economy, but we need to also have different policies. And now if you start to think about, okay, but how do we implement these policies once we are in power or something like that, we probably need also a different type of government. The way it thinks about how it finances itself, mentions of modern monetary theory, as well as from where it gets other revenue if needed, how it designs services, what are the services. But this also gradually leads to us thinking through our role in this. So what kind of future we have in this model. And if I look at this, and then you mentioned sort of care salaries and all of these things, but then we all should also be thinking probably also the question of what will be pensions in this system. Will there be pensions? Will we have a pension age? Or we will just have a kind of a common life caring or being under care, right? And all of things. So at some point you get back to also your individual changes. What are your willingness? Is your willingness, and what are your expectations to the future? And in that sense, I think, reminding me at some of your colleagues who have worked on the kind of one subfield, I guess, of sustainability studies at sustainability transitions. Johan Schott has always come to the conclusion when he studies finance and stuff like that, is that, one of the biggest obstacles on the way to a different form of economy and society is our pension funds. Because they are tasked to carry out certain roles, and we are actually ourselves implicitly expecting something from there. So, fundamentally, if you put these things together, you get to these questions of everything needing to change in some form of a interdependencies or co-evolution. And I think that's kind of, if you take one and the other and get to the third, you get to the point where the change has to be quite significant. At the same time, just to tell another story, last week I gave a training at one sort of environmental training school or something like that, and I was kind of briefly introducing, my role there is to introduce different perspectives of views, and I showed a graph of what would green growth propose as solutions and what would degrowth propose as a solution. And one economist who works in one government institution came to me and said, I looked at the degrowth proposals, and maybe most of them can be also done without the transformation, right? So if we have on a lower level, on a lower level agreements on how do we do social care, or how do we kind of regulate certain sectors or something like that, some of the granular things could be done. You probably will not be able to do them at one go, but you might have a conversation. And his point was, maybe we can actually achieve more without having this kind of big transformation. So I think we can, if we go into kind of practical questions, you might have very different levels of discussion around this.
All right, there's hope. Maia-Liisa?
When we look at our last revolution, the singing revolution, we actually, do you remember what the trigger was? The trigger was actually environment. It was the beginning of environmental action because we were, sorry to say, but pissed off that our resources were used mainly for somebody else. It was our oil shale that was planned to use the phosphorus, start the phosphorus mining, basically pollute our nature and take the profit somewhere else. What is the weird thing currently is that the same thing is planned now, but people actually support it. So something has changed somehow in our society. That if we think that in the Baltic Way, the Baltic chain was organized without social media somehow. Nowadays, we are so connected to social media. 70% of people think we have too much logging of forests in Estonia. And when you organize a protest, there are 100 people. So somehow the current economic system, the societal system, the way our life is organized has actually reduced our sense of self, that we can organize, we can change something. So that basically the Soviet system was less successful in making people passive than the social media currently has. So that maybe this is something we should think about, that how have we come here? Because probably many people feel that they are not happy. Many people felt that they were not happy in the Soviet Union, they wanted to get out, they saw Finnish TV and other things and saw a better life. Maybe the main problem now is that we don't have this Finnish TV showing us this better life. Maybe we should start somehow with this imagination, because it's impossible to inspire people when they don't have a vision of this better future, because we can feel that we don't like the current situation, but if we don't have a vision and a kind of hope that we can achieve it, it's not possible to really inspire and motivate people to get this popular movement that Georgios was mentioning.
Georgios, you would like to reflect back on what you were hearing from the panelists for now?
I don't think I have to add something. I just say that they're all great points. I mean, yes, consumerism, passivity, all these subjective processes of what they're called in sociology subjectification, no? The way we have become subjects and the types of subjects we are precondition, or if you want, part of the co-evolutionary or organic change that it's necessary. So the question is, how do we create new subjects, no? New forms of subject. But this cannot happen out of nowhere, no? It has to start somewhere, and part of what we are doing here is part of this process of subject formation, because we are changing as subjects. We're not perfect subjects or the perfect growthers either, right? So we are changing, we're creating the knowledge that might create some policies or might create some granular changes, smaller changes that then people live within them, and then they start having like different experiences that helps them become also different subjects. This is a slower cultural change, but it's the substratum for any political change. I agree. Of course, you know, I provoked you without planning it. I don't know how it came to be with the singing revolution. I didn't know it was called singing revolution. That's a nice name. I provoked you a little bit to think what the parallels could be, because I guess someone living in 1985 would have thought it's very impossible. They could have very good theories about why the subjects are the way they were, passive, why they depend on the state, why they would never, you know. So as social thinkers or social theorists, we can reflect on that, you know, that entrenched subject positions at some point in history change very fast. Why do they change? How do people that might not want to go along, they eventually go? But we are aware now, it's one way to do a transition from a materially constrained and geopolitically inferior position to want to go to a materially more abundant Finland, as you're saying, next door, and the EU, or And it's another one to say that we should move to a more sober lifestyle, that it's more socialized and we support each other. Might be a harder sell right now. I'm not sure why would it be a harder sell, other than there's no global power than the US supporting it, and there's not the power of television, and there are certain things against it, but I think it's useful to think of big moments where social change took place against predictions that was impossible.
Thank you. I'm wondering here if we could take a moment to stop a little bit on the current challenges we're facing in the society or in Estonia as a whole, and then move on from there for hopeful opportunities and see where actually the door is maybe a little bit already open and we could enter with this degrowth principles and implementation, either revolutionary way or little incremental changes way, so we could get there. But coming for the challenges, so I'm just wondering, looking at the audience here, has anybody here heard that we have economic policy 2035 vision document? Some people are nodding. Does anybody know what's the vision? The vision is that by 2035 we will double Estonian economy. And I took the liberty, I actually wrote one of the assignments for the university on that goal, and I took the liberty and I did some math of like how can we actually, Georgos was talking about 3% of this growth goal and how many years it takes to double the economy. Then with 3% it's 24 years. But in order to double the economy, which is the vision that the state has at the moment, it's an approved document somewhere in some drawer, it needs a 7% annual growth for next 10 years. So that's like, I know we don't live by the papers in that sense, but somebody has taken courage, and we can all describe the person who probably took that confidence to write that number there. So we have this as a guiding thing that we obviously are going in some counter thinking here. We have a lot of social unrest currently with all the different tax changes. We have now also, like, let's say the last 30 years where some people have benefited way more from the implementation of capitalistic systems. Some people have benefited less. We have elections coming up in a couple of weeks. So what's happening in the society in that sense, that what are the crucial things that you think might break the camel's straw? Camel's straw will be broken. The back of the camel.
Straw.
Excuse me.
I think if you think about, I guess, the person you mentioned who took the courage to say that we have an ambition to double our economy in 7 years is also the person who 4 years ago had the courage to say that our economy has to fit in the planetary boundaries. So politicians, to get attention, to be in power and so on, they need statements, slogans, right? And they need to give hope. I think that's one of the main things, right? So there needs to be, in US you have this talk about abundances, or also, as Georgia said, we need different abundances, right? So it's not about sort of just, saying that this is not possible and let's be. I just read a book that said that the worst place a country can go is when it's announced that it's a developed country. Then all the positive stories are over, right? So that everybody should want to be a developing country. Not maybe in the sense of growth, but in the sense of improving something in life, right? So that have a different value. But normally politicians would want to have a sort of a positive story. And I don't think anybody believes that we are going to double it. Like even economists don't believe it. Because even in the capitalist models, bankers would say that we are at a level of development where you're not able to sustain 7% of growth with the resources, finance, and what we have, right? So it's not possible, right? But it's a vision, it's a target and stuff like that. Now, then the other side there is that, there is always politicians try to, I think we as individuals live the same way as maybe top managers in capitalist corporations live. So if you ever read World Economic Forum risk assessments, and when they ask top managers, what are the risks you're afraid of? If they ask what's going to happen within the next 2 years, number one is always something about either COVID, either energy price, misinformation or something, and the second is climate. If you ask 10 years, number one is climate, number two is biodiversity, number three is, right. So it's a human habit. So the short term, get some quick wins and leave really the tricky stuff to the kind of next steps. Like in the morning, you don't go and transform your organization, you fix your desk just to get a quick win, right? And then you start going into something more challenging, right? So I think we have this balance here, sort of short term what we are dealing with, and can we have this kind of a positive long term use around there, right? And I think in Estonia we now just have this kind of many short term challenges that are, or most Europe, when we talk about polo crisis and stuff like that, adding it. And then the question is, what is the big positive story for the long term, so that we suffer through the short and have the view of the long one? And one of the problems we have is that we really, as a country, that we have come with a very short history, right? Although getting a little bit sort of mature as a country, we don't have any other narratives or any other recent successes other than something within the existing system. And let's do it even better, let's do it even more kind of higher rates. And again, personal story, I have done together with Maia-Liisa once was organizing climate schools for Estonian parties. So I have been in also these climate schools, and I have been giving a training to 2 fractions of Estonian parliament for 2 parties, one that is considered itself a social democratic, mentioning no names, and the other one that's considered itself reformist party, mentioning no names, right? Just general categories. And when they asked, okay, but what would be the solution? What would be the way that we give a long-term positive storyline? I proposed to both of them that why not you as a member of parliament procure from Statistics Estonia another measure of success, so that you can tell a positive story for the future, not in terms of GDP growth, but something else. So question for you, what do you think, who liked it? The ones who claimed to be somehow social democratic, or the ones who claimed to be a reformist? Both liked it. Both said that would be very good, because we ourselves as well are struggling, because this positive story that we tell through growth is harder and harder to achieve, it's harder to believe, right? But we are just not having used to having this kind of a conversation, so, a little activity to change a conversation is to have a triangle of success you measure in terms of economic, in terms of social, in terms of ecological impacts of different activities, right? And you change the conversation basis, and you can have a different kind of a positive story that helps you to get over the small, shorter term, big issues that we all worry about every Monday morning.
Mm-hmm. Maia-Liisa?
I think that in the last couple of years, if we look at what is discussed in the society, then I think now even more people think that economic growth is necessary, because all this terrible news of how our economy is shrinking, I think this has been like the most frequent headline. And then, of course, it later appears that it was only the initial evaluation of the statistics office, and then later it appears that actually it's not so bad. But these news, they never make it to the headlines. We only keep it that we have had, 14 quarters or 16 quarters of how much of economic downturn. That actually is not even that much of a downturn. I read yesterday that Latvia downgraded their economic growth from 2% to minus 1% or something, like in 2023. So why are we spending so much energy talking about something that actually we even claim it measures something, but it doesn't? So that even GDP doesn't work to measure GDP. So why are we obsessing about it? But I think now with all this, there is like such a strong connection in Estonian people's minds that like economy is what keeps us going. And it's really weird in a way, because like economy is something we created. Economy is a social contract that we have decided. It's not physics. Well, most of economic theories actually contradict physics. So how have we built a society like this? And I think this is actually kind of a result of how we did our last revolution, because we watched Finnish TV, and then we didn't really understand what made it, kind of what had they done that they had a life like this. We kind of thought that we want a life like this, and then it happened that our prime minister had read a neoliberalistic book. Maybe if he would have read a book by an ecological economist, maybe we would have chosen another path and had a different kind of result. We will never know. So, but now we know that one man's choice of one book can have a big impact. So be careful what you read, people. But I think it's really a problem that I think that many people in Estonia and probably also in other Eastern European countries, in young democracies, don't really realize what is a democracy. I think that it really feels more like it's like I'm the consumer and not the citizen. So that it's that in a way that we criticize that, like in Soviet Union, people didn't have a choice or freedom, and somehow now we have given up our choice and freedom and participation. That we have downgraded ourselves to these consumers, and we didn't even realize that we can actually the current economy is supposedly about demand and supply, but somehow we don't feel that we have the possibility to affect the demand. We are the demand. We can't change everything, but we have power, we have choice, but somehow I think in Estonia, we are even truly passive consumers, and we don't even think about ourselves as agents. So that, and then people who try to behave as having more agency, they are not liked. They are named as biking activists or terrorists or whatever. So that it's that somehow we have, that even though we don't have a totalitarian regime anymore, we still have the lawnmower that cuts all the high grass still growing, but we do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And actually linking what Erkki said with what you said, that we do have a lot of short-term problems. And I mean, the short-term problems are literally you wake up in the morning and maybe you are thinking can I provide food for my family today or this week? And what Erkki is kind of saying is that we need a light at the end of the tunnel, so I will not stress about my food and energy costs, but I see I'm moving towards a better future. So that's also a challenge. How do you get from survival and the constant this stress and unrest and dissatisfaction with what government is doing, what your job is or what life is, to actually envision a better future. And I must agree, we might lack at the moment a better vision and better future vision for that. Margit, you want to add something from your point?
I had time to make a whole big list of challenges. This is so sweet to talk about all the problems we have. And don't blame Finnish TV. I mean, these are the dearest childhood memories of the pop music shows we had. So, and the children's programs they had. They were absolutely wonderful.
And MacGyver.
Absolutely. But let's not be too nostalgic. Anyway, in my list of problems, some of those hindrances are more sort of abstract sociological categories, and others are more mundane. I would, start from what you said as the last point. This is the sort of entanglement of everyday life. We are all struggling with something, with our work and kids and the elderly and their homes and the bosses and whoever. And sociologists call it the acceleration of time. I mean, in a ever smaller time slot, you have to pressure in more and more activities. And as a very small society as we have, the number of active, smart, willing, motivated people to affect change, any kind of change, is always a limited group, and those people are very busy. Whichever kind of change you want to implement, you hit the stone wall of being very busy and not finding common time to agree a meeting. So this kind of acceleration of social time and time being the scarcest resource is one of the things I see on a very sort of mundane level and also on a very abstract level. Yes, I very much agree that we are, as a society and our welfare system and pension system and also our minds, we are in this growth lock-in, I would say. and unlocking this lock-in is exceedingly difficult, because to kill the narrative that something else is possible is just too easy. And we recently, you Erki, were also one of the co-authors. We published the paper which, after being nudged by an editor who was for a catchy headline, we ended up...
I came up with title.
That was actually a quote.
Yes,
from
but I came out that we should use that quote.
All right, let's debate that later, whether it was you or the editor. Anyway, we ended up with a title to our paper which discussed an expert survey, or a Delphi survey, on different types of innovations in the energy sector, and what the experts thought about their plausibility and the time frame. And I'm not going into the details of that, but anyway, the quote that Erki came up with from our material was that communism is worse than carbon. And this is one of our mental lock-ins, I think. Whenever we speak about let's put aside the revolution word, let's speak about transformation. And this is the other stone wall we hit, that this automatically means authoritarianism, totalitarianism. We've been there, we've seen that, and this is a debate killer, so that there are different types of transformation should be possible for humankind, and the Moscow-led format of phase of version of communism, so to say, that we experienced here. And my last point would be, the list goes on, but it gets gloomier and gloomier, is sort of the green fatigue we are experiencing in Estonia. If we look at our Estonian language, what sorts of compound words are there, with starting with the first part, green or rohe? You could come up with an endless list of very juicy words, most of them. Some of them are nice, most of them are not. And also, of course, from a sort of grand aunt's birthday table conversation to the Brussels policies, we see the pendulum shifting right now. The green agenda, the sustainability agenda, is not on the top of the priority list. And this kind of green fatigue means that also now at ministers' level, I just a few days ago, I participated in a workshop where very necessary, organized by the climate ministry, very necessary implementation steps and policies for our green reform or green transition were being discussed, the just transition amongst them, and tying together the discussions and activities around resilience, both the security and sustainability, have a big overlap, but very little debate and conceptualization. There will be a workshop on this tomorrow here, I know. Anyway, and we sort of ended this workshop with a somewhat maybe sad, but still optimistic, that let's rephrase it. If we don't use the word green, let's talk about what Giorgos Kallis is talking about, well-being. This is the common ground, that the policies for better life.
Just wanted to maybe add one thing here, that in addition, maybe also for Georgios, for context, if he wants to comment, but I think one of the challenges that we have in Estonia is that when we talk about the economy, we only talk about this in terms of growth, right? So we measure two things normally, right? GDP growth, and then we start now think about it. Have you ever heard any statistics how many jobs have been created in the Estonian economy? Trump announces every day how many jobs US economy has created, right? Whereas we only count on unemployment, right? So it's a very negative attitude, actually, so that everybody who's in the system, they are all fine. Everybody who's out there, yeah, we need to deal with them. But I think one of the things is that even when you look at the proposals Georgios was proposing, was that actually the kind of economic activity doesn't end, right? Economic development doesn't end, right? It just is directed to different places or different activities, right? So I think what we have here in Estonia is that we should, first of all, stop talking about just growth as a goal, but actually development. The abundance, whatever rhetoric kind of works in the discourse, but shifting away certain activities towards other ones that have better kind of well-being impacts and stuff like that. And I think we don't have this thing. And if you look at the proposals, it is actually part of it, right? It's redirecting people from doing, what some have called bullshit jobs into meaningful jobs, right? It's actually people shifting their own lives as well and having more value or meaning. And especially in AI era, some people say that care and empathy jobs are the only ones that are left for us, right? So to some extent, I think that's one of the most crucial things, is that we should talk about sort of quality of economy, not quantity of economy, but quality and the direction where it goes and whether it actually delivers what we need and what we want. And that is a discussion that actually we have had previously during re-independence and all of these things, and we can have this again. And maybe indeed, as you mentioned, that having this as a discussion around well-being, kind of sustainability of social life and stuff like that, not using the global terminology, because there's also people who kind of study from political science perspective and say that we Estonians don't like sustainability because it's imposed upon us by European Union institutions and policies, as opposed to us defining what it means to us and where it goes and so on. So having this kind of qualitative shift, it's not that difficult.
So thank you, Erkki, for jumping already to the opportunities point. I think we might all agree, or mostly agree here, that in addition, or instead of only measuring economic growth or GDP and announcing it every quarter solemnly, like what happened in the last quarter, is something that we should move away from or towards something else. Margit mentioned that one of the challenges we're actually facing in the society currently is also the time poverty. We just don't have time to pay attention to what's happening globally. How is climate change already affecting my life? What's happening politically? Should you be somewhere active? Should you be contributing to your community? So maybe one of the opportunities also could be we somehow create time, wealth more, or how can we move towards for people having more time to be even more active? So there's like hundreds of different policy tools that could be implemented. Some smaller, some bigger, some more transitional, some incremental. So thinking also what Yorgos was proposing as job guarantee, then universal care income, and then phasing out fossil fuels. So where are the little openings in Estonia? As he also mentioned, not every country is going to do the same policies in the same scope. What door is already a little bit open? What do you think? Maia-Liis.
I can start with good news. I can do it so rarely, so I'm really enjoying this part. But actually yesterday, SALK, the survey entity that does all kinds of surveys in Estonia, they published the results of their qualitative surveys where they researched people's attitudes towards various topics related to the environment. And there was really good news that might open an entry point, because people really hate planned obsolescence. People are really tired of their stuff breaking up, that they can't repair them, that they would want to repair them, but it's too expensive, etc. So that actually this is something that, because people realize that when did we really agree that we have to buy a washing machine every 5 years? Well, if you're lucky, it's 5 years. If they have engineered the planned obsolescence better, then it's only 3 years. But if they over-engineer a bit, then it's 5 years, maybe even 6. So when did we kind of agree that this is the one life we want, that we want a smartphone every 2nd year because it just breaks down and you can't repair the battery, or you can't repair something else that broke down? And I think we actually never did, and people are angry about it, so that they don't want to spend their time on it, actually. And of course, then the advertising is the second thing, that you have this feeling that, and I think also in post kind of communist societies, we are so young that we have this status consumption thing, that we have to drive big fancy cars because everybody has to see that we have this money. Even though we live in an apartment block, but we still have to have a fancy car somehow. I remember we were living in Tartu and just across the street from Onnelinn, and everybody had nicer cars than we had, but we were living in a house. But somehow cars were important, and we see with the car tax discussion that your car is the part of yourself. Why is the government taxing me? This extension of my identity. But I think this planned obsolescence part would be something that would be really, really popular all over. But we also see that this is something that EU has actually tried to address, and we see that there are very strong forces against it, because. And this is something that we can't only do in Estonia, because we have the free market, the joint market of EU, so that this is something we have to do all together. But I think this is a policy that is really, really popular among people. And now the question is that if something is so popular, why can't we get it done? And we probably know that, because it's not in the interest of those who are creating this. And it's also the problem that probably there are like smaller companies who would want to do it, but the bigger companies who have built all their business model on the planned obsolescence. So like there is the first movers problem, like, you can't do it without regulation, because if everybody else is not doing it. But in a way, this could be something that would be practical and popular among people if it could be somehow addressed.
All right, thank you, Maia-Liisa. Margit?
Well, I see my former students in the first rows. I'm a firm believer in education. I know it sounds the low-hanging fruit in a sense that let's educate the people and wait for the new generation to come in, and then we, the 50-year-olds, we can stay the same, and the young ones will come and clean it all up. That's. But anyway, the jokes apart, I do believe in education and also sort of systematically trying to break down the barriers between different types of collaboration. It's more abstract than just this focal debate we are having here right now, but what I'm struggling with in my everyday work is all sorts of silos, whether they are between disciplines, between ministries, between departments, between working groups, and me and Erkki, we've been trying to dismantle the silo between universities with varying success, but we are pushing on. And this is what this sort of, because the cluster problems we are facing in today's world, they don't know disciplinary boundaries. All this sustainability science on the whole is very interdisciplinary. So yes, from the more scholarly world, I would say the push for this more collaborative teams that tackle these interdisciplinary problems, which sounds wonderful, but it's exceedingly difficult to implement. But not impossible, not impossible. It can be done, and there are financing measures and all these things. So that from the scholarly world. Another thing which I know a bit better, because I don't feel the sort of courage to give concrete policy advice and say that do this and success will ensue. What we are working on right now is and dismantling the between university silos is the just transition in Ida-Virumaa, which is an adventure land, of course, and sorry, interwoven with the zillion problems. But there is a just transition fund, and there is the money that's being dished out to diversify the economy, and it's very, very early days to say whether it's a success story or not, but it's much better than nothing. And Ida-Virumaa, I think it's a sort of crucial critical point for Estonia, for the whole of EU, if positive change can be affected there. And it's much wider than just decarbonization. It's a societal change which is right now very much intertwined with the transition to the Estonian language school, which doubles the problems and makes it more difficult. But anyway, I'm hopeful there, and there are seeds of success being planted, And I think my last point would be, and which also resonates with what's going to happen here tomorrow, is foresight and futuring as a sort of method of thinking and collaborating and discussing. Because there are methods that we have done with the students, and some people are very, very skeptical about them and say that this is all, nonsense and wasting our time, drawing those future wheels and talking about how Ida-Virumaa would become sort of cosmopolitan health oasis or whatever. But what I've seen in many exercises that we have done by now is that this radical futuring and foresight exercises are the ones which make people think about completely unusual things that are not possible to discuss in a media or in a regular meeting. And these sorts of exercises bring out the underlying layer of deeply embedded, I would say, dreams and visions, and they are transformative, actually, very much so. And if people are given, even people who would normally describe as very deeply, ossified officials or local municipality people, in these sorts of foresight exercises, they open up. And one of my biggest surprises in the foresight exercises we did in Ida-Virumaa in this April with all kinds of stakeholders from all corners of Ida-Virumaa was that sort of independently in different groups, breakout groups that we were working, the sort of community houses where people, they don't exist, of course, in Ida-Virumaa. They barely exist in Estonia, but where people would come together and make apple juice. And maybe the elderly would live there, and there's a kindergarten, and there's a common space. And that was sort of a common dream, I would say, because there isn't much to vouch for at the moment. But that sort of platforms where this kind of common dream can be teased out from people from whom you would never expect that kind of a dream. I think it's a useful exercise, and we need to keep doing this.
Erki, you already said what we need to do, or where could we enter, but do you have something concrete also in mind in addition to taking some other measure next to GDP?
After listening to two responses, I'm forced to ask, what was the question?
You got carried away.
I asked where in Estonia we have already like a door a little bit opening for some degrowth concept or policy or mindset to enter.
Okay. I think you can look at this from two layers, right? One is really this kind of big institutions that we already discussed, governments and so on. So if you have organizations grappling with achieving growth and not achieving, then they are actually quite open to having different types of values and directions and so on. But I think on the individual level, I think when we talk about building some communities or collectives and stuff like that, so I think probably everybody thinks they are busy, so it's not very good idea to try to establish something new, but actually change the existing things. And if I think from my personal experience, sort of, we have very functional collective action activities where we all participate. When I say functional, and now when you hear what I mentioned, you say these are not functional. But these two things are our apartment collectives, korteriühistud, and the other one is our children's school meetings or kindergarten meetings. Why they are functional is that there is actually already groups of people with agendas, interests, and topics there. And this is actually a possibility to change actually the kind of ways we think about even little things in the way our cities are planned, education system planned, or something like that. It's like, imagine that we all think that, we should have repair activities and stuff like that. And then I see in my children's kindergarten, whenever a teacher says that, can a father come with a drill? and help us to fix something. 20 fathers see a chance to take the Makita out and rush and fix something somewhere, right? So you actually have places where you have this collective drive already and stuff like that, and you can actually use these platforms to, turn these things to something else, not only protecting your child's benefits, but actually having some kind of collective interest and so on around there. And I think these are kind of the activities where, because it's very difficult in today's world, which by the way is designed for us not to have time for other things. Everything is designed for us to consume social media, read our emails, fill in worksheets, whatever things, right? So it's all designed so that we don't have time to think differently. The only places where we actually have time to think differently is the things we care about, which is our kids and our homes, right? So I would use these platforms actually to think about sort of what can we do there. I mean, wondering in Tallinn at the moment now that Tallinn City wants to free us of having to push snow in our streets. Have you read the news? Why don't they just give us the money that they give to companies so that we push that snow ourselves? And then you have this care work and some basic income for an apartment block or whatnot, right? So, they are now collecting money to pay somebody to plow the snow, whereas that could be used by the collective themselves, not to plow snow, but to do something in addition to plowing snow. And you have actually with less money, more impact, right? So I think I would look at these things. Right.
All right, Jorgos, I'm going to give you a word in a second as well, so you can reflect on these thoughts, but I will take liberty to also give my thoughts. I would like to do so many things, and I see so many opportunities in Estonia, but I think, thinking also how we are really proudly on top of different, these charts in the EU context, in some we're low, but, and we like to consider ourselves the new Nordics, where we are, yes, this is a term, the new Nordics, so all the Baltic states. And I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, we're ready also to get a free Monday if Christmas is on Saturday or Sunday. There was news now that Italy took an extra national day, and then somebody did analysis or brought out some analysis so we don't have it, right, Jorgos? We do not have free as Mondays if a holiday is on a weekend. And somebody has calculated that it costs the economy 70 million euros if we would get a free Monday. And I'm like, guys, I think we're wealthy enough to allow ourselves to stay home. We consider ourselves like a wealthy nation, so maybe we can afford it. So, and then we could maybe get some time wealth. We could get some health, maybe, some quality time with our loved ones. And anyhow, I would say the ones who are like attached to their work and are very addicted to working, they will work anyways. They will work on weekends anyhow, through vacation days, through holidays. So they are a different breed in that regard. But Jorgos, would you like to reflect a little bit on what you heard, but shortly, so we can do also a last round?
Yeah, no, it's all interesting. I'm listening. I'm learning about Estonia and the way you see. I just felt that in terms of the opportunities, the focus was either on changes in the civil society and on culture, which I think are very important, like the mutual learnings, the mutual change of perspectives, the doing things differently. So these are things that they are emphasized also in the degrowth literature. Planned obsolescence also is something that has been discussed for a long time in degrowth. I mean, it was a very central idea. I lacked a little bit of listening. If there are any political opportunities on the bigger changes that we talked about? These are important changes. I don't mean to undermine them, but I wonder if there are opportunities to plug in some of these ideas on. And for example, reverse what you just described, and it's not only in Estonia, but it's everywhere about the green fatigue. For example, this green fatigue, where it's coming from? I mean, have we thought where it's coming from? I really doubt that it's coming from actually doing things green and people are really fatigued because not much has happened. I mean, maybe some windmills have been built, which are not, I mean, they're bothering in Greece, they're destroying landscapes, but I don't think it's there where the fatigue is coming from. It's partially a constructed media effect that the far right has very successfully managed to create. So one opportunity to think is like, how can we change this discourse there rather than take it for granted? The other is like, what opportunities are there in the big burning questions of people right now? I mean, I don't know if in Estonia you have a cost of living crisis, but in the rest of Europe, there is a cost of living crisis. So it's there that we should plug the growth, because everyone is talking about that. The far right has very successfully managed to, through its control of fake news in the social media, has managed to convince people that the cost of living is increasing because of green something, and then there's green fatigue. So the question is, I think the growth can be framed as a response to the cost of living crisis, that we want to reduce demand so that prices go down. We need to become more independent from resources that they are coming from unstable parts of the world. One can very easily make the argument there that actually renewable energy right now is cheaper than fossil fuels. So why would you depend on fossil fuels and depend either on Russia or on crazy Americans? It's very. There's a very clear case there. I mean, I know you probably in Estonia people love Americans, but they're crazy right now. So one might want to think of some kind of sovereign energy independence, So I would dare just to think a little bit bigger in terms of the growth. Small is important, and this is where our power is. But I would dare just to think bigger, because if the big narrative and the big picture is dominated by these things that they are completely the antithesis of what we are arguing, then I think the small things that they are important to change little by little, I'm not gonna get as far.
But if we have a vision to double the economy, and that is ambitious, you said it's a vision. We don't have to reach visions, it's just there to aspire us. So I'm hearing Georgos is also like inspiring us to have like big dreams, even though if we only reach very minor part of it, as it will be with that economic doubling economy goal. At least I hope we do not double the economy, because for doubling economy, either we have to work way much more, we have to extract way more resources. It's basic economics knowledge of like what goes into economy to even like grow it or double it. And we will not get free Mondays then, guys, I'm sorry. All right, I'm conscious of the time, but looking at your carefully listening faces, and would love to give an opportunity to maybe one of you. Oh, yay, Halliki. All right, enthusiastically knows to raise the hand immediately. A question or reflection. I'm seeing that my mic runner is sitting so nicely on the chair. So I will mic run myself. Here you go.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for your talk, Yorgos. Nice to see you on the screen. I think
if you come here, he will see you also.
Okay, I can, yeah.
Come
okay.
here.
Hello, hiya. I think everything that you've talked about is sort of interesting, but what kept popping into my mind the whole time was Aaron Van Sintian's book about the sustainability class, and that we have this kind of like liberal, overeducated middle class that's quite narrow in society, and we focus all our energies on like knitting circles and making our own apple jam or whatever. And actually the reality is that we are maybe actually quite a very small part of the world population, very small part of Estonia, but there's already a lot of people living degrowth lifestyles. Like a fifth of people in Estonia are in energy poverty. A fifth of people have very low, like 18% have very low energy consumption, so they're probably choosing not to heat their homes to be able to heat. And of course, this is not the kind of degrowth that we want, but I think we are kind of missing the bigger structural chances, and I'm happy that Yorgos brought this up. We're missing the bigger structural chances actually to really make the world better, and also to spread degrowth. And that's kind of my worry, but it's great that fathers are bringing their maquitas to the kindergarten, all of this, love it. But I think what we're facing is, kind of a slow collapse. We know that the economy is not going to function as it did. And the people that are going to be hit hardest are not the people in this room, because we are the middle class, liberal classes, but it's other people. So the question is, how do we organize? What are the structural forces? Who are the agents of change? You know, it's not going to be the applesauce makers, so that's not going to bring sort of the structural change. And how do we sort of organize? How do we get this bigger movement? It's also, you know, it's nice for us to talk about these other things, but I think this was really, really missing for me, especially in the Estonian context, with so much poverty, inequality. I think we are getting wealthier, but we are also one of the most unequal countries in Europe, right? So we have a huge concentration of wealth and also overconsumption at the top. So I think like 50% almost of wealth is owned by the 1%. And I think we're not going to get people with the applesauce. We're going to get people by saying like, okay, well, we need better housing, we need public transport, all these things that meet basic needs at a much lower energy. That's going to make your life better. What we know is that what people care about when it comes to either accepting or not accepting sustainability policy, I'm going to stop my speech, but it's cost, ease of access, normalcy, how normal it is, and health. So if we can make the case, okay, it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be normal, everyone's doing it, it's going to be easy to do, and it's healthy. That's how we get these bigger changes, and that's what we have to campaign on. All these other things are really nice, but it's not this big thing, and the big crisis that we're facing, it's huge. You know, we need huge changes. Yeah, sorry. So this was just like kind of brewing in me the whole time, and I just wanted to scream it, and now I did. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Oh, you can give it to Michael. Thank you, Halliki. All right. Agents of change, and I think this could be our final round of going away from jam and makitas. Erki, put it back into your storage room.
Okay. So yeah, I think.
Who are the agents of change in Estonia to make big changes, not incremental?
Depends on from where you want to start the change. But I think what I want to respond to this is that there is this challenge, I think, here that when we talk about about degrowth, then this message is of certain segment of society towards other segment of society, neglecting everybody else who has other words, right? So we need to actually translate, or you need to translate the ideas or principles into things that matter for others. So in that sense, I think it's about, when we talk about really solutions, whether they are degrowth solutions, whether they are more sustainable solutions, well-being increasing solutions or something like that, then you need to have a storyline also for the people who are either not being able to afford them, to show that this change will benefit you, or a different message to other groups. Because at the end of the day, you still need, in this kind of a concept that George just described, you still need production, right? So you need people who go to work to produce, you still have people who need to be helped out and stuff like that. So this is a differently organized, but a society with similar challenges as we have one today, right? So I think you need to have this kind of conversation and the message to different places, right? And it's true that, you know, this is one of these big challenges with any kind of transformative innovation. The stuff you're proposing, whether it's a new technological solution, whether it's a new social practice, when you're proposing it into a very mature legacy system, it has to be better and cheaper than the existing one, or more convenient one, to a large extent. To the people who are not on board, who are not willing to make the extra. So for the majority, this has to be cheaper and easier, and this is a huge daunting task in that sense, but the message then has to provide value for different kind of interest. But one thing what Georgios was asking is this kind of a political, how do you get this kind of discussion into political space? So for what I've been thinking for the last couple of weeks, I think in Estonia, is that there is one way you get it nowadays into the political discourse, and this is actually data. If you think about what's happened with all of economic development discussions last week, nobody believes any national statistics at the moment, right? Statistics office says we have 7 more trees. Nobody believes because they have screwed up 2 or 3 times, right? And what we have is as you call it, what was it, the entity, SALK, they are very, very insulted that you call them an entity. They are a movement or whatever they want to be, right? But you have privately popping up organizations, collectives who are able to actually provide different versions of data, different versions of analysis, what is happening in society, right? And we don't have any more sort of state data or economic data or something that people actually believe, but everybody has today very simple compute skills to run their own data analysis. I think we have this possibility. And we have, when I said 3 or 4 years ago to the parliament's members, order your own alternative measures, then now I say make your own alternative measures and make it visible and have a conversation. Your investments or your activities policies as a minister increased Estonian GDP by 0.2, but the environmental impact was minus 0.8. So was it really good? And then you can have this conversation. So I think these two things that I have for the
All right,
change.
data. Margit, a bit shorter than Erki, please.
Yeah, I usually am. Well, I think we basically fundamentally want to retain democracy. This is, I hope we agree on this, because an enlightened monarch would do all those things, probably in a sleight of hand. But a monarch could do all sorts of different things as well. So if we want to maintain democracy, this is going to be all of us, different sorts of conversations, which are messy, which we might fight, we disagree, and this is slow. So if we want a very quick, revolutionary, transformative change, it must be a shocking crisis with probably horrific consequences, both good and bad, or a monarch.
All right, Maia-Liisa?
I think the only agents of change who can be are people ourselves, in the sense that I don't see any other force currently in Estonian society really, because I don't think we have any really existing structures or anything like this. So, and actually also my biggest fear is democracy, because we have this connection in our minds somehow that this free market capitalism that we currently actually don't have, but that this free market capitalism is the guarantor of democracy. Actually, it's not. It's the biggest danger to democracy. We see that in US, where actually the oligarchs themselves have already said that democracy and capitalism are not compatible, and they are obviously choosing capitalism over democracy. But this is a discussion we don't even have in Estonia. If we think there is no discussion about democracy, there's only discussion about GDP growth, not even economy. In this sense, Erki, you were right. We would need to start really have discussions. We are having discussions about tax changes, but not about why are we changing taxes? Like, what do we tax? How does it impact? So that we have really nitty-gritty technical discussions, but not really widespread, like visionary discussions. So I want to get that back apart from the Singing Revolution, because then we had this stuff. So I don't know who will do it.
Edgar Savisaar wrote a book in 1985, Global Problems and Whatever Things, and he argued there that neither mass consumption-based and mass production-based capitalism or communism is sustainable. Only sustainable thing is a self-sustainable Estonia or isemajandav Eesti, right? So we had this kind of a visionary discussion, right, already 30 years ago, right? So
I'm 40, by the way. It was 40 years ago.
yeah.
All right.
Really.
Yorgos, word for you.
No, I think we concluded you need a Singing Revolution 2.0. That's how you could launch it. But without Finnish pop. I mean, I don't know much about Finnish pop, but if it was good, the pop songs of the first Singing Revolution that you watch on Finnish TV, I would like to have them. It sounds very cult. Thanks.
I would say that it has been also calculated how many people you need to make a change in the society, and it is 3.5%. And for Estonia, it is only 50,000 people. So think about it. In order to make a change, you just need 50 times many, 50,000 like-minded people, and the change can happen. With that, our time is up. Thank you so much, all the panelists. You are gifted honey from Otepää. Use it wisely, share it with your loved ones. Yorgos, thank you so much for joining us through internet wonders. People seem to be pleased, at least what I see from their faces. Nobody is sleeping. Thank you. And we continue after the lunch break. Let's do a round of applause for everybody.